So just a few short months ago, KastKing shocked the bait finesse world by coming out with this Kestrel Elite, which on paper sported the most impressive bait finesse specs of all time. It was the lightest reel, coming in the high 4.4 ounces, and it sports the lightest stock BFS spool by a long shot, I believe coming in at 4.5 grams. Now combine that with having a magnesium frame, stunning good looks, at least in my opinion, awesome build quality. A lot of people were turned off by the $220 price tag. And if you were one of those people, this new bait finesse reel by KastKing might be for you. Introducing the KastKing Valiant Eagle 2. And it comes in a very similar box to the Kestrel Elite, but instead of blue, I think it's orange. And this reel retails for only $80 on AliExpress. Now they recently had a sale on AliExpress up until I think the 11th of November, where I saw this reel as cheap as like 56 bucks. But I personally ordered it too soon and ended up paying the $80, but oh well. Let's open this box up. And boom, check that out. Even though this is, I guess, considered a budget reel, they still box it just like the more expensive reels. You got this foam cutout that keeps the reel snug and keeps it from moving around. And the same paperwork, so we're going to move that off to the side. But yeah, check this reel out. The Valiant Eagle 2. So I'm assuming this is going to replace the current Valiant Eagle, which a lot of you guys here in America may not have known, but they sold it at Academy Sports. And I was actually almost about to buy one, but I guess that reel's going away and this is the replacement, which in my opinion looks a lot better. Now comment right now if this color scheme looks familiar to you, and tell me in the comment section which reel do you think that KastKing was copying with this, I guess, bronzish brown body and red accents. Okay, feels smooth enough. But yeah, check that out. Alright, so I'm going to do my usual inspection, compare the differences I see between this and the Kestrel, and I'll be right back. Now before we begin, I'm going to go ahead and answer that question that I asked earlier about what reel was KastKing copying when they came up with this color scheme for the Valiant Eagle 2. And that reel is the 2017 Shimano Scorpion BFS. Now it's not an exact copy because the KastKing has a slightly deeper brown color, but you can definitely see the red accents. And in fact, KastKing went ahead and did something that Shimano should have done with this Scorpion, and that was given the inside of the handle that red anodization. That really would have set off the Scorpion, but KastKing did it while Shimano did not. But while we have both reels up here, here's a size comparison between the two. So this is going to be the same size comparison between the Valiant Eagle as well as the CURADO and SLX BFS. Now if you want to see more size comparisons, go to the Kestrel Elite unboxing video because I compared that reel size wise to several other BFS reels. Okay, so now it's time to compare the Valiant Eagle to the Kestrel Elite, and hopefully we'll see a difference between the two reels that will justify the huge price gap between the two. Now they are based on the same frame and side plates, but with the Kestrel Elite, the frame is made of magnesium and the side plates are made of carbon. Now with the Valiant Eagle 2, the frame and side plates are made of graphite. And you heard me right, graphite. KastKing didn't even try to dress it up either by calling the frame carbon. It simply states graphite on their store on AliExpress. So right there is probably the major cause of the huge price difference between the two, but let's go further. Now obviously you can see the top of the frame is a little bit more chiseled on the Kestrel, while there's not as much detail on the Valiant Eagle, even though it still looks good. Now the Valiant Eagle has a little bit more detail on the palm side plate. Hopefully you guys can see that versus the Kestrel. You can see there's a defined edge right there, and there's like, I guess, a line going right there, while it's not really present on the Kestrel. Now the front of the reels are slightly different. The portholes on the Kestrel are, I think, a different shape than on the Valiant Eagle. Now another big difference is going to be the handle and knob assembly. You can see the Kestrel is sporting a carbon fiber handle with these, I guess, standalone knobs, while on the Valiant Eagle the handle is aluminum and they're giving it, I guess, less finessey Shimano style flat paddle knobs, and the knob tolerance is not as good on the Valiant Eagle versus the Kestrel. Now while you saw some in and out play on the knobs of the Valiant Eagle, that play is not present in the Kestrel. But I think I prefer the knobs on this Valiant Eagle. I think the handle length may be the same. Maybe the Valiant Eagle has a slightly longer handle, it looks like, but the drag star looks to be the same. The spool tension looks to be the same, just red for the color accents on the Valiant Eagle, while on the Kestrel it's gold. Now the spool tension does click on the Valiant Eagle, and it's the same precise micro clicks that you'll find on the Kestrel. Now one big change is that if you look at the trim piece on the gearbox, it is plastic or graphite on the Valiant Eagle, while on the Kestrel it is machined aluminum with some nice color anodization and writing. Much better looking on the Kestrel. Now surprisingly, the thumb bar is the same on both. You know, you have this little channel where your thumb rests, but you still have that rubber piece for grip on the Valiant Eagle, and you also still get the cone-shaped tapered line guide. And I'm not sure why my Sony camera is not focusing. There we go. And it looks to be the same size as on the Kestrel, so no change there. Now the brake dial is still made of aluminum on the Valiant Eagle, which is good, but it's a little bit less detailed, as you can see, versus the Kestrel. But it still looks good. It's still got that little window with the indicator arrow to let you know what brake setting you're on, and the clicks are very, very positive and quality feeling when turning this brake dial, just like on the Kestrel. But other than the color and the finish of the paint, you can see that the Valiant Eagle is sporting a shiny gloss finish that feels pretty thick, while it's more of a matte satin finish on the Kestrel Elite. But overall, turning the handle, I don't feel that much of a difference. Now the gears in the Valiant Eagle are supposed to be brass, at least the main gear, and I'm pretty sure they're aluminum in the Kestrel. But oh yeah, the spool porting is different on the Kestrel versus the Valiant Eagle, but it still says feather spool on both. Now, just because they both say feather spool doesn't mean they're the same weight. Of course, that means we're going to pull the scales out and compare. Okay, so the scale's out, and I also brought out a reel that would probably be considered competition for the new Valiant Eagle 2, but I'll show you that in a moment. So, gotta flip it over to ounces, and let's weigh the Kestrel Elite 4.49, just like in the unboxing video, and the Valiant Eagle 2 feels slightly heavier. Let's see what the scale says. Wow, not that much heavier, 4.66. So at 4.66 ounces, the Valiant Eagle 2 is actually the second lightest bait finesse reel in the world to date, at least amongst the ones that I've weighed. Alright, so now let's weigh a reel that would be considered, in my opinion, the main competition for this Valiant Eagle 2. That's going to be the Sornoya Dark Wolf Ultra, and of course this would include all the variants that are using this same frame. So that would mean the Black Knight 2, the Acura Solo King, the Micro Monsters, etc, etc. So the Dark Wolf Ultra comes in slightly heavier at 4.7 ounces. So these two reels weigh virtually the same. And while I got them out, you can see a size comparison there between the two. It looks like the Dark Wolf Ultra is not quite as wide as the Valiant Eagle 2. They look to be about the same length, but height wise it looks like the Valiant Eagle is definitely a lot lower. But both of them palm extremely comfortably. So now it's time to get a weight on that spool. Okay, so of course the special spool scale's out, and to get to the spool on this Valiant Eagle, you just pop that down. Side plate comes straight out, no twisting. And wow, it's much easier to pull the spool out on this Valiant Eagle than it is that Kestrel, but it feels super light. As you can see, it's the short spool shaft. Looks like the bearing's got plenty of grease on it, and yeah, there's the brake system on the Valiant Eagle. It looks to be exactly the same as the Kestrel Elite. We'll test that in a moment. But let me move some of this grease out of here. There's a clump of grease on that bearing, which I'm going to remove here in a second. Alright, so let's go ahead and weigh the spool of the Kestrel Elite first with the bearing. It's coming in at 5.42 grams. Now I believe, even though the porting is different, I think they're the same diameter at 28 millimeters. I don't know, it looks like the Valiant Eagle, which is this spool, is it a little bit taller? Who knows? But let's go ahead and weigh the competitor Dark Wolf Ultra spool. That's coming in at 6.179 grams. And then here's the Valiant Eagle, 5.513. So pretty much the same as the Valiant Eagle, just a little bit heavier, and that could be, of course, due to manufacturer tolerances. But it looks like, let me see if it'll fit. The spool is probably 28 millimeters. Yeah. The Valiant Eagle spool fits right into the frame of the Kestrel Elite. And despite the porting being different, which could also lead to the slight difference in weight. They're pretty much the same spool. Now, if you are an owner of a Kestrel Elite and you saw that the spool of the Valiant Eagle, which is a much cheaper reel in price, is virtually the same, would that piss you off? But anyway, I'm going to remove the bearing and get a true weight on this spool, of course. Okay, so the bearings are off both the Valiant Eagle and the Dark Wolf Ultra spools. And if I'm not mistaken, this spool weighs 5.3 grams on the dot. So for the longest time, this Dark Wolf Ultra spool, even though it's got this long spool shaft, was the lightest stock spool of any bait finesse reel ever, easily beating any of the spools from the Japanese when it comes to weight. But the Kestrel Elite and of course this Valiant Eagle 2 have much lighter spools, with the Valiant Eagle 2 coming in at 4.65. Now, I think the Kestrel's was like 1/10 of a gram lighter, but once again, that could be due to manufacturer tolerances or the fact that these ports are a little bit different. But that makes this budget Valiant Eagle 2 have the lightest spool of any stock bait finesse reel in the world, tied alongside with the Kestrel Elite. Now, the one thing is though that you can see the big size difference. The Dark Wolf Ultra, and I think all the variations like the Black Knight 2, the Micro Monsters, the Acura Solo Kings, I believe these spools are 30 millimeters, while of course this is 28. That does definitely play a role in casting performance. And on a side note, I believe the Dark Wolf Ultra does have the lightest spool out of all the reels that use the same platform as the Dark Wolf Ultra and the Black Knight 2. So now that we've seen that KastKing has given the Valiant Eagle 2 pretty much the exact same spool as the much more expensive Kestrel Elite, let's see if they gave it the same brake system. And it looks like they did. Now this is, I guess, KastKing's copy of Shimano's famous finesse tune brake or FTB system, but I think I'm seeing some differences already. Or is that just my eyes playing tricks on me? But yeah, I do see one major difference right there. I don't know if you guys can spot it or not. We'll talk about that in a moment. But let's see if these brake arms move or pivot just like Shimano's FTB. Yep, looks like they do. And the other one should do the same. Yep. Now I'm going to compare the travel between the brake systems. It looks to be the same to me. Yep, the travel seems to be the same between both brake systems. And the reason I'm comparing is because, in my opinion, the brakes feel a bit too strong on the Kestrel Elite, and that could hinder the performance of such a lightweight spool. Now, if you watch my Kestrel Elite versus the Trout Magnet video, it does handle the Trout Magnet pretty easily, but I believe the brakes were so strong that they affected the trajectory of the lure when casting. It kind of pulled it off to the left because I'm right-handed. Alright, now let's talk about this. Now, one thing you see that's missing from the Kestrel Elite brake assembly is this, what appears to be a metal ring circling this brake assembly piece right there, and that's not there on the Kestrel Elite. Now, it could be that KastKing saw all the videos on the Kestrel Elite and saw that people were finding that the brakes were a bit too strong, and they did something that Shimano did with the new ALDEBARAN BFS, and they added this, I guess, metal ring around the brake hub that might cancel out some of that magnetic force. Now, I went ahead and brought out the brakes of the new 22 ALDEBARAN BFS, and it's hard to see, but there is this metal ring that's circling this portion of the brake assembly, and it's much thicker on the KastKing, as you can see. But let's do this. So I believe right now the brakes are extended to their maximum position, and you can see how far it's popped out. And yeah, the Kestrel Elite has its brakes set to maximum, and what do you guys think? They look the same as far as how far the brakes are popped out? Or does the Valiant Eagle look like it pops out just a little bit more? Or is it a trick of the eyes because this brown piece on the Kestrel is smaller? But we're going to retract these brakes to their minimum position. Yep, there we go. And let's see if KastKing did anything different with the Valiant Eagle. Oh yeah, check that out. So I don't think the brakes went down any lower. What it is once again, this brown piece is taller. So it allows, I guess, the brakes to be covered more than on the Kestrel. So KastKing responded quickly to the criticisms of the Kestrel being overbraked, and they solved that problem, at least on paper, with this Valiant Eagle 2. And they pretty much just took a page once again out of Shimano's book and put a metal ring around this brake assembly, and they covered the brakes up even more in the minimum position. So that excites me, and I can't wait to get this out on the water and do a cast comparison. Now let's count the number of brake adjustments. So 22 clicks for a total of 23 settings, which I believe is the same. And I wonder if KastKing is going to do the same with any new Kestrels that they make. Are they going to give the Kestrel this new, I guess, brown piece of the brake assembly to cover up more of that brake in the minimum brake setting? But yeah, that is a huge improvement, and if I was a Kestrel Elite owner and I saw this, I would be pissed off. But don't be pissed off just yet, because we got to cast these two reels side by side to see if there's any kind of reel on the water difference when casting bay finesse lures. So before we go over my final initial thoughts on this Valiant Eagle 2, I wanted to do a couple of things real quick and show you guys some things that I missed. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to do a quick eye test on, I guess, what could be the difference in brake power between these two reels. Now I've dialed the brakes down to their minimum position on both reels, and I've set the spool tension on both reels to have just a small hint of side-to-side play, and let's see if we can see any kind of visual difference in how long the spool spins. So here's the Kestrel Elite. So just barely 2 seconds. Okay, so here's the Valiant Eagle 2. Okay, so not a huge improvement, but definitely an improvement, because I counted about 3 seconds of spin time on the spool of the Valiant Eagle 2, where it was around 2 with the Kestrel Elite. So hopefully that'll translate into some on the water improvements. Alright, now the other thing I wanted to show you guys was that the Kestrel Elite has that nice looking lube port if you want to add some grease to the gears, while the Valiant Eagle 2 does not. And the final thing I wanted to show you guys is that yes, this Valiant Eagle 2 does have a drag clicker. And it sounds pretty much just like the Kestrel Elite. Maybe the pitch is a little bit higher, but I'll tell you this, on the minimum drag setting, it takes more effort to, I guess, get the drag going on my particular Kestrel versus this Valiant Eagle. So I just want to show you that because I know a lot of people are wanting drag clickers in their reels these days. Okay, so I got a question for you guys before you wrap this video up. Now, based on what you've seen and what I've showed you about this Valiant Eagle 2, are you planning on getting one? Now leave that down in the comments for me. For what you've seen is impressive enough for you to pull the trigger and buy one. Now personally, had I known that they were going to come out with this Valiant Eagle 2 and given it all the same important performance aspects of the much more expensive Kestrel Elite, like the spool weight, but also they've seemed to improve on the brake system, I probably wouldn't have bought the Kestrel Elite, to be honest. Now don't get me wrong, the Kestrel Elite, you can definitely feel that it is made better than this reel. It's made with more refinement, but we're talking, you know, almost 3 times the cost. And potentially this cheaper reel is going to cast better. So kudos to KastKing for making that change on the brake system like real quick. I mean, you're never going to see Shimano or DAIWA make a change to one of their reels like that mid-cycle. They usually wait until the next generation of the reel to make any kind of improvements. But yeah, the next question is this coming to America? And if so, how much is it going to cost? And also, if it does come to America, is it going to replace their hot selling Zephyr? You can see the huge size difference between the two, as well as the huge size difference in the spools. Or are they going to sell them side by side? Because to be honest, the Zephyr makes more sense in the American market the way that I guess most people see Bay Finesse versus the Valiant Eagle. But I guess only time will tell to see if KastKing brings this over to the American market. But for now, if you're interested in this reel, go to AliExpress and I guess go to the KastKing store. And hopefully they haven't sold out since that big November 11th sale. But of course, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this reel out on the water and see if the brake changes equate to any kind of real world performance gains versus the Kestrel Elite. Alright guys, thanks a lot.